Are we
Hey
just
everybody. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
are we just waiting on people coming in?
Yeah, no, we're gonna get started. We're gonna get started right now. People will keep coming in, so that's all good. So hey everyone, my name is Akash. I'm the president of Sprint U of T. We're super excited today to have amazing panelists talk about their experiences around the tech industry. I'm joined today on the Sprint U of T side with Deep Pandya and Rohit Arora. Deep, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone. So as Akash mentioned, my name is Deep and I'm part of Sprint UFT. So for those of you who are new and don't know what Sprint UFT is, we're an organization that got started about 8 months ago. And our mission is really to advance student careers in technology, in tech at the University of Toronto. And we really want to educate the UFT community about careers such as software engineering roles, product management roles, data science and product design, because we feel that we started this organization because we feel that there's a real need to talk about these different careers that are available in tech. And we really want to give back to the UFT community and really help people land amazing jobs at some of the companies that our panelists have interned at before. Now I'll be passing it on to Rohit, who will be leading the panel today. Rohit?
All right, hey everyone. So my name is Rohit and I am the Director of Events for SprintUofT. And I don't really want to get too much into the background, but I'll jump right into the actual event. I also want to mention that we will be monitoring the chat. So if you guys have any questions between the whole event, just remember to jot it down, put it in. We'll be monitoring that the whole time. So without further ado, let's get started. And I want to start off the panel with just getting introduced to all the panelists and just who they are, what their discipline is, and what places did you work. So I want to create some hype behind you guys. Let's start off with Cindy.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Cindy. I'm a fourth year engineering science with a major in electrical and computer engineering. And I've had the opportunity to work at a bunch of different tech companies, most notably Google, Facebook, and Asana.
That's awesome. That's really great. So you've already worked at 3 different companies and you were always a software engineer at these companies, or did you have different roles between these companies as well?
Yeah, so I was always a software engineer. Well, primarily, I started off in what's called the engineering practicum program, and it's sort of like an entry-level software engineering internship at Google. And so it's a great way to like get your foot in the door. The expectations are much lower, and it's more of like a fun learning environment rather than like what people think of as traditional internships.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to move on to the other panels, but I'll come back to you on some other questions. And so next up is Daniel. Tell me about yourself, your discipline, your year, and what places did you work?
Sure. So hi guys, my name is Daniel. I'm an electrical and computer engineering major, specializing in computer engineering. And in terms of my work experience, I worked at a few companies, but most notable being Microsoft, Citadel, and Snowflake.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And again, were you always a software engineering at these companies, or were you playing around between different roles?
I was a software engineer at most of these companies, but I did play a bit of a data engineering role as well at Citadel.
Awesome. And finally, Mithun, tell me about yourself, discipline, year, and what places do you work?
How's my audio?
Great.
Does it get disconnected? Great. So my full name is Mithun, but everyone can call me Mitt. I'm a mechanical engineer in my senior year, and I have almost 2 years of work experience writing software in the automotive industry, most notably BlackBerry QNX and at Tesla. I've written software for manufacturing teams to autonomous driving teams and also firmware teams.
Sounds awesome. And again, final, just to continue on with the chain, were you a software engineer at all these companies, or did you play around with the different roles?
Always writing software for different sub teams, but the theme was always automotives.
Awesome. Really good to hear. So what was your first company that you worked at, and what was it that you did at your first job for your first internship? Mithun, Mitt. start
All
off.
right, perfect. So my first role was at BlackBerry QNX on the core operating systems team. So this operating system runs on vehicles like General Motors, Jaguar, Volkswagen Group. And my first role was writing C code to optimize something called the device driver. And so in the interview process, I really told them to trust me, even though it was a mech, to give me the role. And I definitely took full advantage of it and learned a lot by working.
Okay, so I was actually just about to ask that as a continuation question. Did you feel that your knowledge coming from a mechanical engineering background, did it either help you, did it kind of set you back, or how did it get involved with you?
My mechanical engineering degree really had nothing to do with everything I've worked on. I remember on my first day, I didn't even know how to do a command line on Ubuntu terminal. I didn't even know what a terminal was. So it was a complete disaster my first week, but learning things like Git, C, how to write safety certified embedded code, all of that was learned on the job. And it was really enjoyable to learn it by doing instead of learning it in a class setting for me.
It's awesome to hear. And I'm glad it really helped you out in the end. I guess it wasn't really your knowledge that you learned from school or classes, but the transferable skills of how you're able to think and how you're able to do stuff on the fly. That's really what helped you, I guess, in your actual job.
Totally agreed.
Awesome. All right, moving on to Daniel again. What was your first role as a software, or where was it? And what did you actually do in that role?
My first role was I was a software developer, software engineer intern at a startup called ClearBank. That's located in Toronto. And they're still around, but and they're a fintech company that specializes in providing automated loans to companies, and those loans they have like their gimmick essentially is that like the payback process for these companies is not like based on equity or anything, but they just have to pay it back based on the revenue. So I was working on the technology behind those systems as well as building tools for the sales team because ultimately a fintech company does need to have a lot of clients. So in order to have mass interaction with clients, I worked on building the tools that can help keep track of those clients, kind of like an internal CRM tool. For those of you familiar with like how reaching out to these clients work. And during that process, it was kind of the basics that I learned as well. Just like Mit said, I learned like Git. I learned a lot of JavaScript, learned a lot of React and Vue. Basically, the basics of web development in that sense.
It's really interesting to hear. And as an ECE, did your skills from classes help you as well, or were they just kind of there to get you to the company, or did they have any role in your company?
At the time, not really. I think I gained most of those skills kind of from the side. But I will also note that because this was kind of my second year, a lot of the useful information from EC definitely comes in the latter 2 years of your education.
Actually, it's a really good point that you bring up gaining some skills on the side, because that's going to be another question a little bit later that I'm going to ask. So do keep that in mind. I'll be coming back around to that. Cindy, on to you. How did you land? Where was your first position, and what was the job actually like?
Okay, so my first position was as an EP intern at Google, and I worked on Google display ads on a project that was trying to automate the process of finding production level bugs. So that way, instead of having someone who's on call notice an error and then try and figure out the root cause, the goal of my project was to figure out that root cause for them. It's a very complicated project, and it wasn't like I wasn't the only one working on it. It's like a 10-year long project. But it was really interesting because there's a lot of small things you can do that contribute to the overall success. And it was really great because I got to learn a bunch of how back-end coding works, how front-end, and how like massive data systems work at Google and how to like process all that information.
That sounds really, really cool, actually. I kind of want to hear more about that. Um, could you dive a little bit deeper into that? Actually, I'm love to hear
Yeah,
more about it.
sure. So essentially, when things are running in production and things are running smoothly, you have a bunch of metrics that behave normally. And it's almost like a problem of anomaly detection, where if your latency, for example, spikes or your clicks decrease, that's usually a good indication that something is broken. So the question is, how do you figure out what's broken? And especially like at Google, there's like probably hundreds, if not more, machines running a bunch of code at the same time. And what you can do is leverage the metrics on each of those machines and find, at least my project did, was find correlations between these metrics. Using the correlations, you can say, oh, we noticed this spike in latency was on like cell 1, cell 3, and cell 10. And so the next thing you can do is say, well, what's a common process running in all these cells? And that sort of helps on-calls like figure out a more specific place to look for what's going on, and that can like save the company a lot of money, just like avoiding downtime.
That's great. I know Akash has a question that he would like to ask, so Akash, you could take the floor for now.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'm thinking right now is all three of you have amazing experience. I want to jump to Mitt for a second because I think Mitt has a very interesting case here. Mitt is a mechanical engineer, yet has a lot of software engineering experience in industry, which is so valuable, right? That's what a lot of us are trying to strive towards to some degree anyways. So I think, Mitt, you have like really interesting experience in talking about the skills you practically need to actually get an interview in the first place and then actually get a job from that interview. So do you think you could talk a little bit about your interview preparation to begin with, landing your first job? You mentioned a little bit about how you knew as a mech it was going to be different for you, but could you talk a little bit about specifically what you did to prepare for these interviews in a very practical sense to actually get these jobs?
Totally. So I knew 5 minutes into this degree that I really didn't want to work as a mechanical engineer in my future, but I did enjoy the mechanical aspect of it, the physics and all that. So I stuck through it. My end goal was Tesla. And so I knew there's no chance I was going to compete with UEC folk to get the Tesla straight out of the, for PY or whatnot. So right from first year and second year, I really focused on joining school teams. And the team that I joined was U of T's self-driving car team. It aligned with my interests and kind of my skill set at the time. I joined as a hardware lead. So I was doing a lot of mechanical design work, mounting hardware, radars, LiDARs to the vehicle. And so it was really mechanical focus. But through that, as a lead, I took on side projects on the software sub teams. So on my resume, I was able to build up project and proven ability to take a problem and find a software solution for it. And on the side, I also pursued projects that were automotive related and software, things like traffic light classifiers. There's open data sets online, kind of using Python, learned how to create a classifier for that. Other kind of mini projects, some similar to what Udacity offers today. And so with all this project experience under my belt, coming into my job applications for BlackBerry QNX, I was at least able to get the interview. So that was part one, how to get an interview. And I think my main point there is to display proven project experience for the younger years, showing that you could apply software to solve a problem. Part two was, to this day, I've never taken an official data structures and algorithms course or anything like that, some fundamental courses that you guys take. But I did the typical, I have some books beside me right now. This one, Bible, you guys know this one. And then I went through this, data structures and algorithms, and that, you know, for every interview since, whenever there's a coding challenge or any technical aspects of it, these two books really did help. So all this to say, getting the interview, I had to demonstrate proven project experience on my resume, and then to perform in the interview, doing the classic hacker rank, cracking the coding interview, things like that was key.
Yeah, definitely. That's super valuable experience. And I hope our attendees can really appreciate like how important it is to do more than just do well in school if you want to get these jobs. And so I'm hoping maybe Cindy can now talk about same question really, like what did you do maybe outside the classroom to kind of get these interviews in the first place?
For sure. So I actually didn't want to go into software engineering. At least I didn't think I wanted to go into it. And after first year, I actually did research on like materials science and mathematical modeling. And so I actually didn't have much on my resume that related to software, and I didn't really do projects because it wasn't something I was interested in. But I think what's nice is when you're in your earlier years of undergrad, these companies aren't really expecting too much from you because they know you're a student, and they're not looking for someone necessarily that knows all these knowledge sets and all these skill sets, but someone that can learn them. And so I think that was primarily the reason why I was given an interview. And then after that, it was more the whole studying process, going through practice exams, figuring out what kind of interview the company will give you, and just making sure you're comfortable with answering those kinds of questions.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is super valuable, I guess. I think one question that we've gotten from a lot of people, and I think it's also another super valuable and practical question. It's kind of okay, after you might have the skills for a job, you think you know how to code in whatever language, you think you know how to solve problems, and you have the experience. The next step is actually getting a recruiter's attention. So Daniel, I think it would be really cool to hear your experience about how you approached, I guess, getting a job in the first place. What was the process like for you? Did you just apply online and see your resume go away, or was there more to it that you kind of put into it?
Frankly, I think it's ultimately a numbers game, and that number has to start off being a large number in the beginning, and obviously once you have more experience, it tends to get a bit easier to get responses. But yeah, ultimately, I struggle just like everyone, and I kind of just did as many online applications as possible.
Cool. Yeah. Do you think did you ever have an experience where you found yourself in a position where you were compelled to maybe message a recruiter on LinkedIn, or maybe even cold email someone at the company?
I have tried that, but I'm somewhat skeptical. I know people have varying experiences with doing that. I'm just somewhat skeptical of it because it's never succeeded for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Cindy, of course, jump in. I'm curious to know about all that from each of you, because I think that's an interesting aspect of it. A lot of times we see people on LinkedIn or something, they'll be don't put your application in this black hole of an application process online, but reach out to someone at the company and try to get a referral if possible. So again, all three of you, I think I'd be super interested to know, did you guys do anything outside of just applying online? I'll direct that at Mitt first.
Cool. So I never did the hitting up the recruiter thing. It never worked for me, and I never tried really to go after that avenue. My roommate does it all the time. He's way more successful, but he shoots a shot with everyone. So I guess it goes with the point that was just mentioned. What I did was, so like I said, BlackBerry QNX General Motors is a customer of BlackBerry QNX, and the U of T self-driving team was partnered with General Motors. So since there was that corporate connection there, it wasn't as hard to get noticed by BlackBerry QNX. Now, while I was working there, firmware for automotives is the same no matter what car company you're at, and Tesla makes their own firmware. So at the time on LinkedIn, I was messaged by Tesla's firmware recruiter, and then I just transitioned over. So I think my advice there is, if you have a end goal or end company that you want to work at, I think you could create a very easy, not easy, but a path for you to go to a company to kind of get you to the end goal, kind of a step company, you know?
For sure. And just for context, Mitt, you're going to be joining Tesla in 2021.
May 10th, I'm going back. Yeah.
And that'll be your full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's amazing, right? So congrats, first of all. It works,
Appreciate
right?
it.
Planning it out in advance, maybe even years in advance, it does make at least, shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon, right? That's the idea, right? You'll do something amazing. And I think that worked out for you and really all of our panelists here. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Deep has a question he'd like to go forward with.
Yeah, so you guys talked about your first internship and how you guys landed that, but I wanted to know about the internships that you got after your first internship. And did your strategy when it came to applying change throughout the years, throughout the number of internships that you've had, or did you just follow the same strategy that you used to get your first internship? Cindy, if you could talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I guess the reason I went into software after second year was because I was looking for jobs over the summer, and software engineering jobs were just much more available. So my first one, I applied online directly to the company's database. But then afterwards, especially after you've had your first internship, I feel like you meet a lot of really cool people that are going to a lot of cool places. And it's very nice to like be able to leverage them and say, oh, where are you working at? What do you like about it? And a lot of the times, like they're more than happy to give you referrals to places that they're working at. And so I think after my first internship, I was primarily trying to leverage my network to see like where everyone else was going and what places they liked and trying to get there as well.
Awesome. Daniel, how would you be able to share if your strategy has changed over the years, or how did you get, you mentioned that you worked at Microsoft. Was that right after your internship at Clearbank? If so, how did you land that?
Yeah, kind of like what Mitt said, I kind of thought it initially as like a stepping stone strategy. So Clearbank's a great company to work for, but I ultimately did want to work at a bigger company and have the experience of like working in the States. So that's what led me to like Microsoft. And then as for the companies afterwards, it was more so about opening up my experience, and at the same time, obviously I wanted to go for companies that pay a lot more. So that definitely played a role in the decision.
And for those companies, did you just cold apply online on their website, or did you reach out to people directly?
I mostly cold applied and got very lucky.
Okay. Now, when you, like most of the time when you cold apply, people think of it as a black box, and sometimes your resume gets noticed, sometimes it doesn't. Was there anything specifically that you did to get your resume noticed?
So there are strategies you can do to make sure your resume does get noticed, like having keywords. One interesting thing that I did note is like my resume wouldn't pass the filter unless I had a certain company name in there. I guess to get a bit more descriptive or to get more in depth, I noticed that when I only had, so when I was working at Snowflake and I was trying to apply to jobs, I initially had only on my resume my Microsoft position. I didn't write my current internship into that resume, and I would apply for some companies and I realized I wasn't hearing back, and then I would write Snowflake on there, and then I started getting a lot of callbacks from the exact same companies. Example, Citadel. So that kind of opened my eye to like how the system is gamed, and everyone knows that a lot of these resumes go through like automated parsers and bots that look through them for the recruiters directly.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. Akash, I believe you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess like really quick to comment on that, I think like one big takeaway from what Daniel just said is like your resume cannot be the only version of your resume. Like you have to continually go through it and see what's working, see what's not working. Like update it. I think like personally for me, it's not even relevant, honestly, but I have like 20 versions of my resume, and some of them work really well. Some of them don't ever work, right? So I think just like that continual updating is super important, like Daniel mentioned. One thing I want to make a quick comment on is I think a question we got also asked from some attendees is the idea of like how much in school actually matters, and specifically your GPA. So questions that most people always have is like, does my GPA matter? Does it not matter? Especially when I'm getting a job. So I want to hear from all three of you. Like, did your GPA make a difference? Did it ever hold you back? Does it make a difference at all in the long run when you're really pursuing a big tech job? And I guess we'll go Cindy, Daniel, Mitt. So take it away, Cindy.
Sure. So I've heard rumors that your GPA matters, but I also know like from experience that a lot of companies just don't care about your GPA. And one example is like Facebook never asked me for my transcript at all. And I've had friends that I interned with at Facebook that just said, if you give me an offer, I'll drop out of school. And they just dropped out of school the next day, and now they're working full time. So I think it depends on the company. Some companies do care more about GPA, some don't. But I don't think your GPA will ever hold you back. Like I've known people that interned at Google that had like 2.75 GPAs, for example. And so it's like what you have in complement to your GPA that helps you stand out as a candidate. And like it's your entire package, not just the one part.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel, go ahead.
I mostly agree with Cindy, but I definitely do think GPA does play a factor in certain cases. I know that a lot of companies that, like, for example, if they have too many candidates and they have to, start cutting them off, GPA is definitely one of the places they look for. And that's definitely something the Big Four does. And I've experienced that when applying to startups as well, unicorns and things like that. And as for finance companies, such as Citadel, Jane Street, and the like, GPA is actually pretty important. I know that Citadel has has like a very hard cutoff at like 3.5 or 3.6 and above. So that's kind of so I do agree that GPA isn't that important in the majority of cases, but there are certain companies that do look for these things.
Yeah, definitely.
And am I next?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. For myself, degree and GPA never mattered. It was never brought up in the interviews. But that's because on my resume, I offset the conversation from having to focus on that. What I mean by that is I had significant project experience, extracurricular experience before my jobs that I got. And today, like, that's not a conversation that that ever comes up. What else was I going to say? No, that doesn't apply to specific companies, in my opinion, because I've sat beside hiring managers that have thrown resumes out in front of my eyes because of GPA cutoffs that they had set. And I've also sat beside managers that that overlooked the GPA and really focused on things like project experience and proven work experience. So I think it is also by luck too. And I think that's why it's important to shoot your shot and apply as much as you can.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, we talked about how to actually get the internship, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how, like, once you have your internship, how do you make sure that you do well in the internship? And how do you, for example, Mithun, I believe you went back to Tesla for another term. And Cindy, you've been to Google like 2 or 3 times and then Facebook 2 or 3 times. So if you guys can touch on how you actually, what advice you would give to someone once they get an internship, how do you actually do well in the internship once you have it? We could start off with Cindy and then go to Daniel and then Mithun, that order.
Okay. That's a really good question because I think a lot of people only care about getting in to the, getting your foot in the door. But like what happens at the internship matters a lot in my experience. So a few things that I say really, really help is asking a lot of questions. Like your managers don't really care if you don't know anything because you're a student. Like you're not supposed to, otherwise you'd be hired for a full-time job, not an internship. And so ask questions and take advantage of that time to learn. Like even after graduating, you want to spend like the first 6 months of your new job, like just learning as much as you can, because like that's the time you won't be penalized for it. And that's information that's really valuable later on. The second thing is, even though you're an intern, you should try and take initiative over your project as much as possible. So like drive your project to completion, look for ways to improve it that your manager, might have overlooked, because when they're planning out intern projects, they don't know all the details about it yet. So like take a lot of that initiative yourself, like contact people for help, reach out to different teams you may be working with. Like these are all ways to show them that like not only can you write code, but you can actually be productive to the team and help them reach their goal. I think those are my 2 biggest pieces of advice.
Got it. Thanks. Daniel?
I think since Cindy really hit the nail there, firstly on the idea of like asking dumb questions. When I first had my first few internships, I always have imposter syndrome. Like, do I really belong here, and things like that. And when people come up to me with the same statement nowadays, I tell them like if you're not asking dumb questions in the first few months of your job, then you're at the wrong job, because like you're obviously not learning. So in those instances, I try to encourage others and encourage myself to try to be more forward about asking questions. And at the same time, when you're asking those questions, do it with people you can build relationships with. I think it was really important for me to build relationships with my manager and making friends with other interns, because while it's obviously it's fun to like have friends and all, but it's also a good payoff in the long run, because now you have a network of people that you can rely on in the future as well, that are working in different companies or maybe working in the same company. So that's another thing. And while I do think that a lot of people should prioritize their internships and, get their project done. I think if I could maybe just like add a comment about like kind of more modern work culture, what I do notice is that when interns and new grads get into a new company, they tend to like work their butt off. And I'm not sure if that's the most healthiest approach to it. I would say do what's necessary, finish your project, make sure you're doing what's right for the company and doing what's right with your manager and taking initiative in those ways. But at the same time, you should also kind of realize that in the end, it's a job, and the job is not the entirety of your livelihood. So those are things to consider as well.
Good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Mitt, would you like to continue?
So I got the chance to work 2 8-month contracts. And a typical contract length is 4 months. Both times I came in not knowing anything. So I requested from my team in the first couple of weeks to be able to onboard the incoming set of co-op students or interns after the 4 months. So that really forced me to get up to speed and really have a working knowledge of all the topics or skills that was needed for the job. And I was able to reteach that. So that really helped solidify that aspect of kind of learning and being able to reteach it. Part 2 is I requested to have weekly or bi-weekly meetings with my manager to just check in, to let him know about my progress, and so I could get feedback from him. Part of that was also midway through the work term, I would have a longer meeting with him to get more feedback on my performance. And the same thing happened for my final review. So I think getting constant feedback like that will really help you adjust and better optimize your capabilities to learn on the job and perform on the job.
Yeah, that's super valuable insight, I think. Rohit, I know you have one question, so we can go ahead with that.
Yeah, so just before we open the floor up for everyone's questions to ask themselves, I just want to ask all of you guys, what is your advice for people that are trying to find internships at this point in the process? What do you think would help? What do you think they should avoid? Any tips and advice do you got? I'm just going to open it up for all of you three. I don't know if you guys want to go in, if you guys want a specific order, but I guess, you know what, let's go with Daniel first, moving into Cindy, and then finish it off with Mitt.
So sorry, what was your question again?
What is your advice for people trying to look for internships now?
I definitely think since, job searching, you should have a strategy behind it. And right now, I think the optimal strategy is probably reaching out to local companies, especially if you're in Toronto, you should probably reach out to a lot of Toronto companies. And I know a lot of Canadian companies are putting up their postings now. So that would be what I suggest. And just the other advice that everyone has given, like making sure you're getting your word out there. Try to reach out to recruiters if you can, things like that.
Yeah, I would say don't get fixated on like any job. For example, like don't be fixated on maybe working for a tech company right away, or like a big tech company right away. Like be open to different experiences, because like working at a startup or like working on various smaller companies like gives you a background that's unique to a lot of other people, and that can help you like bring new perspectives to the table later on, and you might learn more. Like there's a lot of valuable learning opportunities out there, and you can get where you want to be when you graduate, like in a huge number of ways. So like look for all sorts of opportunities and like don't dismiss them if they come by.
So in my case, performing during an interview, it can be anxiety inducing and pretty challenging to get good at. So I actually started applying for software jobs in September, even though I was initially only available for April. I was starting to apply in September for January start date jobs. I didn't care if I got the contract or not, but it was just to really get the practice in, because I felt that my resume would go through easier since it was an off-peak time of applying for jobs. It's typically Waterloo students and others that are applying compared to April. But actually, by chance, that's how I got the BlackBerry job. And I'm glad that I left school after December and went off to work, because today I'm able to achieve the goal of going to Tesla. But really, I think a good piece of advice that other friends have applied is applying for those January start date jobs just to get the practice of doing software interviews. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, whatever, you got practice in. Part two is instead of cramming the last week with all your job applications, just doing a job application a day at night before going to bed. Over 2 months will add up to 60 job applications. So that's what I did early on. I started early and applied a job a day or 2 jobs a day instead of cramming near the end, 100 job applications. So
That's awesome. It's all really great to hear and really good advice from everyone. So just before actually we open up the floor to people asking questions by the raising their hand feature from the reactions, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions from the chat to whoever was specified. So I see Pat had asked, Mitt, how do you get the software job without much programming experience? How much coding experience did you have while interviewing? I know you already mentioned this with the Crack the Coding interview book, but do you want to go further into this or?
So yeah, just to be specific, I had done a year on the self-driving car team, and over that year, I did self-driving car related software projects. So that's that extracurricular side that I had under my belt going into these job applications. Part two, I just went after doing software projects on my own. So all this to say, that's what helped me get the interview. Now, performing in the interview took a lot of I had no idea about algorithms. I didn't even know what big O notation was. So for me, it was a bigger challenge than most of you guys. So I had to really get up to speed. Khan Academy, YouTube, huge for that. So in my opinion, with these kind of resources that you have access to, you'll be able to prepare well for the interview. It's just getting the interview, which is a bigger challenge in my opinion.
Absolutely agree with that. Just before I forget, I'm going to drop in a link to our feedback form because we are coming closer to the end. And if anyone wants to leave at this point, I don't want them to go without having a little feedback form. So I'm just going to drop that in the chat. If anyone can take a look at that and write some feedback while we're still asking some questions, that'd be great. Also, I'll move on to Daniel. I have a question for you. How did you prepare for your interviews, or how did you go about doing that preparation?
I think I go with like the standard, crack the coding interview and doing a lot of leak code. For like more specific companies, I would, go on Glassdoor. Glassdoor is like a website that holds reviews and interview experience of the companies, and sometimes they have the questions that people get asked, and they usually won't have like the exact same questions, but it's in like the same kind of format or like topics that get generally asked. So I would go on Glassdoor and look there. And if a company is like known for a specific topic, that way I can like research that beforehand. On top of that, kind of like what Mitt said earlier, I would sometimes like do interviews with companies that I wasn't necessarily interested in, but I thought it was good practice to kind of hone up my skills, because interviewing isn't just like, it's not just a game of like answering a leak code question. It's also like you have to be mentally prepared and be able to speak properly and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I guess at this point, it's nearing the end of the last 15 minutes of the session. So at this point, I'm just going to open up the floor to the participants to ask their questions themselves. So participants, if you can get into the reactions button and raise your hand for whenever you have a question, please do, and we can let you present. All right. Well, we do have a bunch of backup questions if no one's ready to jump on. So I do see in the chat there are a couple more questions that I did miss. So I'm going to ask, would any of you recommend the AWS certificate? Is it worth it? Is it worth your time? Is it worth the money? And this is for anyone to go on.
Mr. Balasubramaniam, I think I know him. That's why. I think if it's relevant to the job that you want to do, great. Like, for example, if you're going to go work for Google Cloud or Amazon AWS services or Azure team at Microsoft, that would be awesome. Otherwise, if you do have to pay money for it, I think you could pay for better courses that are more relevant to what you want to do, but that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
So I know I'm not a panelist, but I do want to agree with that. At the same time, I want to disagree with that for the reasoning that in my own experience, in my own internships, I've seen that cloud is the movement that a lot of companies are going towards, and a lot of tech companies are looking into having developers that have experience with cloud technologies. So I know a lot of positions that are asking for a lot of certifications in AWS, Azure, or even Google Cloud. So having that experience does help you. But again, like Mit said, if it's geared towards the job that you're going for. So if you are going for a software engineering job, usually a cloud experience is helpful.
I want to jump in really quick. I have a couple DMs here, so I want to ask them on their behalf. One question I think for all three of you and I don't know. So the question is, how is your transition going back to the student life after your PEY term? And I know technically I don't think you would have done a PEY because I think you would have split it up. But I think the idea is like, what's your school life like after you've done an internship? Let's start with Daniel.
I think it's mostly fine. My study habits are definitely worse. I can attest to that. And I think the bigger change is like mostly the coronavirus pandemic and online schooling. That's mostly affecting kind of my study situation. So actually, that's not a good answer because I didn't really answer your question. But yeah, like I'd say it's a weird experience. Does take some time to adjust my study habits for sure.
And Cindy, I'm really curious to know, once you've gone to Facebook, you've gone to Google, you've gone to Asana, like what's your mindset like in school? Like, how do you feel about sitting through classes again after that? What's your motivation after that? Does it like complement each other? Like, what's that kind of like for you?
Yeah, so I really don't enjoy school as much anymore, which I guess isn't too surprising, but I like overloaded a lot in third year. So this year I'm kind of taking courses, or I signed up for a bunch of courses, and when I don't like it, I just kind of drop it. But I'll say like I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to learn more and prepare me for my career when I graduate, but I couldn't help but like take very irrelevant courses like control theory, groups and symmetries, like just these random courses for fun, I guess. And I think that motivates me more because I don't really feel like I'm being forced to learn it. Like I'm just learning it out of pure interest. And also like I'm kind of a little bit of a perfectionist. So I like really like I won't really submit something unless I'm proud of it. Which is the only reason I'm like staying on top of all my stuff right now.
Yeah.
I think when you're on salary and you're forced to learn and deliver, that does build a pressure cooker environment because you're expected to learn quickly and deliver. But it made me realize I'm the one paying for school today. I'm the one that's here to learn as much as I want to, and no one's really expecting anything else from me. So I found that I'm performing way better, and I would highly advocate people to go and work in industry. It'll make you realize how good university is as a learning opportunity, but also you'll improve your skills, your learning skills, your performance skills, academic performance skills a lot more, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. One question from Pat I've noticed here is, do you have any tips to find and keep up to date with new grad job postings the first day they're posted, or I guess as soon as they're posted, essentially? Mitt, you want to keep going with that?
So today I have a pretty good network on LinkedIn. So every time I see likes of new job postings and stuff, I see that come up. But before I had all that, you could kind of predict the release dates for jobs, usually in mid-July, mid-January for April start dates. And so I would start early, like I said, starting in mid-January and then checking weekly to see if these sites would update. So all this to say, I know it's kind of brute force, but going to the sites going to the job boards that you want to work at, like for example, BlackBerry job boards, Tesla job boards, and seeing the summer postings go up live is what I used to do, kind of starting early and just checking the sites often.
Pretty cool. I have another question for Sydney. Since you're coming from a Google background and a couple other companies, what technologies were you most close with? So what programming languages did you use? What cloud applications did you use, or if any?
Yeah, so I primarily code in C++ for backend stuff. But then depending on the company, they'll have different preferences. So for example, Facebook primarily uses its own language called Hack, and for front end, they use React. But then at Google, like you'll see more people using Angular, and it's like, or like Go. It's like a lot of different languages based on where you're at. So I don't really think it's very necessary to like be very strong or like be very familiar in many of these languages, because wherever you are, I feel like you're going to have to go through that learning curve and become up to date with whatever technology the company uses. So like at Google, like they use their own internal build system. They use their own internal, version of Kubernetes, like all these different technologies. A lot of the big tech companies have their own versions of, and you'll have to end up learning it anyways. So yeah.
Cool. I believe Swapneath has a question messaged in the chat.
Yeah, so I'm just going to ask a question here, if you don't mind. So I think my main question really lies with, sorry, messing around with the camera. I think my main question really lies with, sort of getting through the, the application hell, or let's say, whenever there's a new posting on LinkedIn, and you already see like, there are 400 people applying, right? It's sort of demotivating. And, I tried the numbers game, I've applied to like more than 200 places right now with cover letters, and I still haven't had any luck. Tried reaching out to recruiters and stuff, and that never worked out for me. So like, how do I, do you have any tips for getting out through, out of the masses, like sticking out, and like how do you get through application hell? For example, Cindy, you told me you did the engineering practicum, right? I applied too, but then I don't know if I didn't, I think my application wasn't that strong. And so do you have any tips to, improve applications just to stand out and, get the interview and get your foot in the door?
Yeah, so like that's a good point. Like I would look out for programs like engineering practicum, which I think is called STEP now. Like there's lots of them. Like Facebook has one called Facebook University. Microsoft has, I think, the Explore program. And so there's like a lot of these good entry-level programs with much less competition. As for the application itself, when I did the EP application, we had to write like 5 essay questions. And I just tried to be as like genuine as I could. Like I was very blunt that I probably don't have the same background as a lot of like ECE students. But I was eager to learn, and I tried things with like transferable skills. And I said that like my background in EngSci made me unique because I learned a lot of things that weren't software related, and I thought there was a lot of transferable skills in that domain. And it ended up being true. Like a lot of the signal analysis stuff I learned, I actually used in my internship. So I think it's like leveraging the experiences you do have and trying to show like how that makes you unique. Because companies are really valuing like that diverse set of backgrounds, right? They don't want to hire 100 people with the exact same background, like that all know leak code and cracking the coding interview. Like there's not as much value versus finding people with a lot of different unique skill sets that bring diverse perspectives to new products, or like have a unique way of thinking about things.
Daniel, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess one way I think is a good way to usually when you're having these problems of like applying to like 200 companies and getting no responses, it's usually a problem with your resume, because that's the method in which you
I've checked the resume with people who are interning at the places that I want to work with and all that stuff, and they said the resume is fine. At least I should get an interview or reply back. But I feel like that's not happening for me. Maybe I'm just really unlucky or something. But yeah, I am confident that my resume is not the problem.
You can contact me after. I'm willing to take a look at your resume.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
But in the majority of cases, when I see people going through these issues, it's usually a problem with the resume. And I went through kind of like similar issues or struggles, I guess you could say. And I kind of like try to make my resume eye-catching in a way, and also try to not focus on just the technical aspects of myself, because I know there's a lot of companies that like to see people who aren't just like engineers day in and day out. They have like some breadth of experience. So those are some strategies that I've tried in order to get better callback rates, I guess. Yeah.
And my last point, to touch on what Daniel said earlier, just remember a lot of these hiring agencies or companies are using software now to filter through the resume. And also some of these hiring managers or recruiters may not be the most technical people. And what I mean by that is it's on you to look at the job posting and adjust your resume to have the keywords in the job posting. If the job posting says write embedded C code, well, you better have the word embedded and C code somewhere on your resume if that's what you wanted to do. So I understand content-wise, your resume might be nice, but wording it properly, addressing it for the job posting is way more key. And I think Daniel's going to help you with that. But we're a team. I could help you out too, Daniel. So yeah, I think you're in good hands.
Really quick, I want to jump in there. We're at 3 minutes, and I know Guest has a question there, so we'll get to you in a second. Just to add on to that really quickly, because I know I've kind of seen this work as well. I think when you have like 200 applications, you have like 400 applications or applicants to a specific job. Of course, that's intimidating, right? Like it would be naturally intimidating. But I think one thing that really helps in that case is having referrals in some way. And referrals can come from a bunch of different places, right? Like you can know people personally, you can know people who you just like cold message on LinkedIn, or I think one thing that's worked really well for me in the past is the idea of like alumni. So people who go to U of T who are in the positions you want at companies you want, reach out to them on LinkedIn, find them on LinkedIn. Like you can search for them on LinkedIn, and like even if they see U of T and you're a U of T person and you add a note to every single message you send, chances are someone's going to get back to you. It's just the odds are higher. So having that referral, it does make a big difference. But again, Daniel, they're going to look at your stuff afterwards anyways, I think. So they'll take care of you there. I want to have Guest ask their question because I do see your hand is up. So feel free to unmute or chat away in the chat.
Yeah, sorry. I realized my name was a Guest. I'm Ari. Hi, sorry.
Hey.
First thing, can I also ask if my resume could be checked, if that's a possibility? Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
You can go ahead and contact us on LinkedIn or whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. I really appreciate it. And second thing, in terms of cover letter, I've heard from people that the importance of cover letter, especially in tech companies, are getting lower and lower. And I was wondering if I could get hear your thoughts about that.
I personally hate cover letters with a passion. I think I dislike how, like, if you read on the internet, like the career advice is like write a good cover letter, because I've never written a cover letter in my life, and actually I have done it for the PY program. So but in general, I discourage writing cover letters because, like I said in the beginning, when you're getting a job, it is a numbers game, and writing 200 cover letters is just a hassle. Though I'm curious if the other members have a different opinion.
So I actually have gotten a lot of feedback from cover letters. So when I was in second year, I applied to a few companies, and during one of my interviews with Mozilla, like the interviewer straight up just read my cover letter to me, and it was very awkward, but she seemed to like find it very like valuable. She's like, oh, this is what you're interested in, I see, and these are the skills you have. And we actually like had a very long conversation about my cover letter, which was really weird. But even like with Google, those essay questions I talked about, it was sort of like a pseudo cover letter. It was like the things that I would talk about in a cover letter except they ask for it more explicitly. So I think if a company asks you for a cover letter, I would take advantage of that. A lot of the times, like, recruiters aren't the most tech savvy people, like Mitt mentioned. And so, using a cover letter to explain in English why you're good for a position, it's like, I'd say it can be very valuable.
And finally, a resume is there to outline your skills and why they should give you the opportunity to interview. But I think a cover letter can outline some of the quirky side of you, or what makes you unique. So in my case, I'm a mechanical engineer in the software space. So the Tesla, I try to spin it as like how they're an underdog in the automotive industry. I'm the same. I'm an underdog in this software space. And so what I'm trying to say here is you could really paint a funny picture or interesting story for the recruiter to kind of catch their eye or catch their, to flag your application through. And so I've gotten feedback on that. And that's kind of how I've gotten the opportunity to interview for software roles before, is by really selling my unique story through the cover letter.
I see. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're at 8 p.m. We're going to end our panel. We just want to say thank you to all the panelists for being here with us today, and also the attendees for showing up. We hope you guys learned something new. And once again, I've posted the feedback form in the chat. If you guys can fill that out, that'd be really appreciated. And feel free to reach out to any one of us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to help with any questions that you guys have. And be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on LinkedIn for more events. Akash, is there anything more you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think, of course, thank you to our panelists. I think one big takeaway is, like, it's not the end of the world if you don't get these jobs, right? There's so many things you can do to figure it out in the end eventually anyways. So again, thank you to our panelists, of course, and everyone, do stay in touch with us on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. We're here to, like, build a network to help each other out. We are going to have, I think, a couple different offerings going forward. So, like, some office hour type thing where you can come in and just ask questions to anyone here, and we might feature different people from different places as well to keep it super casual and just, like, get quick questions out of the way. But yeah, again, thank you to everyone. Looking forward to meeting hopefully each and every one of you individually as well in the future. Rohit?
That's pretty much it. I think Akash and Deep have covered everything. Really appreciate everyone coming, and hope to see you guys again at our next event. Oh, actually, I do want to stress that we will be having more offerings, as Akash mentioned, but some of these offerings that I want to mention are, again, similar to how Daniel and Cindy and Mitt have been offering their expertise in creating resumes or guiding resumes. We will be opening up office hours and even resume editing sessions to get to that more open and out to you guys, so you guys have some more help along your path. So yeah, stay tuned. Again, like and follow our Facebook page, and we'll have a lot more information over there coming up soon. Thank you.
Last thing I'll say is, do tell your friends about SprintUofT. We do want to, like, help as many people as possible and, like, at least get the word out as much as possible. So if you enjoyed today, please please tell people you know about this, and take care, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hosting the event, and thanks to the panelists. Have a good night. I will definitely message all of you on LinkedIn if you guys don't mind. So be prepared for that.
Of course.
All right. Bye-bye.